And we're back for another live. I'm Geraldine Anello, and I am here today with Dan Garmon. Hi, Dan.
Hey everybody, how are you guys all doing? I guess I can't even hear you.
So Dan was the music director of the tour of Cruel Intentions, but Dan has done a million other things. And I was thinking of you, Dan, because I've known you for maybe 7 or 8 years at this point.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Last time I saw you perform live, I did not know it was going to be you. A friend of mine had invited me to see a downtown theater thing, which I never even
I don't
do
even know.
usually. And so I know you don't. I don't.
Is.
And so I came out to this thing with my friend, and I turn around and I see you with gloves on that had lights on,
Jesus.
and you were moving these like cool light gloves things.
That project was just something else. It actually ended up off Broadway. It was actually
Tell us what it was. Tell us what it was.
That show was called Cleopatra, and it was kind of like an immersive. This was when it was still at Theater for the New City. It ended up actually Cynthia Meng and a couple other people from the group ended up working on the one off Broadway. I was
Cynthia Meng, everyone. She's the new assistant music director of Company on Broadway.
Yes.
Wonderful pianist.
And Brian Yusufer actually took over my vocal supervision and vocal arrangements for that one as well. But it was basically like an EDM rave, because Cleopatra, it was all about this Cleopatra thing, and Cleopatra was known in ancient Egypt for throwing these gigantic raves and parties, and so it was kind of like half immersive, half a club thing, and all of the music was EDM, and because it needed enough conducting, because people couldn't always find the beat because we didn't have proper monitoring because it was a workshop. We solved the issue by buying me a set of rave gloves from Amazon, which were the ones that have like LEDs all over the hands, and I just stood at the top and vocal conducted. It was insane.
I think that should be the new standard for all conductors out there, that we shall never stick conduct any show without having our LED gloves on, because that is so cool.
I'm surprised that Andrew over at Share Show, or like some of the more party-driven Broadway shows, haven't brought the rave glove.
And Andrew is Andrew Resnick, who was the amazing music director at Share, and his associates in Itabac, and they were both so wonderful. And you're right, there was a dance party at the end of that show.
Every single. Did you sub on that one?
So I used to sub there, and at the end, it was a full-on dance party. Everybody would stand up in the pit. The violinist would stand up with everything, and you'd be at the keyboard, and we'd just be jamming and dancing. It was so fun.
Yeah.
You definitely should have had LED gloves on. You're right. Good point.
Absolutely. Anyway,
You're always up to like really cool projects. And I was thinking of another project of yours you did that I would love to hear more about, which was one where there were lots of different music teams in different rooms, and people would walk in different rooms hearing different music teams do different theater things. How did that work?
So I believe you're referring to the Bad Years.
I think that's the name of it, but I will take your word for it.
It's the only one that satisfies those criteria. Basically, this is an immersive Kerrigan Loudermilk piece that it's been going for like 12 years, many different inceptions. Originally, it was Tales from the Bad Years, but also there was another name for it too, which I'm forgetting. But in any case, that was back in 2016, and actually, ironically, we were on track to come back this year, and then we encountered a couple complications, and then we obviously with the virus and with everything's kind of kaput now.
What was the concept of it? How did it work?
That show is kind of what we wanted to accomplish basically was to create the Sleep No More of musicals. So essentially, basically full immersion. So you had 14 protagonists, and you walked into this space, which was actually a warehouse in Bushwick. We built a replica, I think it was 8,000 feet or 8,000 square feet, suburban home inside this warehouse, and everybody could walk around. And basically, there were no rules. You were given, when the house opened after kind of this proscenium opening, you could wander, you could do whatever. You could play drinking games with people. You could follow characters that you vibed with. You could sit in a room and wait for what things kind of came through that room. So we basically, like the challenge of that one, I was one of the music directors on that one, and I ended up actually kind of coming into more of a supervisory role. Just in terms of logistics with Brian Loudermilk and Jeremy Robin Lyons, who is also in the group, and Matt Hinckley was on guitar and was the band leader. And actually Scott Wasserman, who just led the workshop last night. Scott was the Ableton programmer, as well as Dana Haynes, who was the associate on Moulin Rouge. So that team was just like unbelievable, and that project was such a logistic nightmare, and we had a blast. So I ended up playing drums in the real thing, but so much of that show was just coordinating, like, yeah, when you have 3 or 4 songs happening simultaneously in different parts of the house, just someone has to be keeping track of exactly how that was happening. We had to build a proprietary computer program to like keep track down. We calculated beats per minute and bars and all these things. So we knew like at this point in the house, someone's going to have to run over there and have 30 seconds to start this song. And it was just insane. But that was one of the, that's exactly where I love thriving in this community, is creating like really interesting new projects that are challenging our conceptions of what theater can be. And that piece was super exciting.
How did you rehearse it? How did you rehearse something like that?
I'm going to be honest with you. I kind of blacked out during the entire process because it was so, I mean, honestly, like we would rehearse in chunks. Like once we kind of modeled it in the computer and we were like, okay, we'll start at this point, and then 10 seconds later, this chain of events needs to happen, and then here and here. And obviously, had we actually brought it to off-Broadway, which we were hoping to, we would have had in-ear monitors, we would have been all on click together. But obviously for this one, because it was like a workshop and it was still a lot, there was a lot invested in it, it was pretty piecemeal. And we had a lot of people kind of running around being like, you start now, you do this. And it was just one of the coolest things, and the response we got was incredible, and we gave a lot of people a theatrical experience that they hadn't necessarily experienced before, especially for people who like miss the feeling of suburban house parties. I know a lot of people grew up in the suburbs like me, and that was a big part of growing up, was just kind of being together in a space and having some beers. And yeah, and of course there was a meta narrative, and it was a musical, and there were 72 songs in it, but also just the feeling of being in the house was cool. That was a crazy project.
You do so many crazy projects. I would love to hear also about, you did 24-hour musicals. How does that one work, and what is it?
The 24-hour musicals is an offshoot of the 24-hour plays, which was, and oh my gosh, Michael. I'm forgetting the name of the managing director, but he is incredible. And they've slowly over the years put together these things. They've done it everywhere. They do it at many different levels. And I had the pleasure of doing it twice, actually. The first time I did one called The Nationals, which was for like 20 to 25-year-olds, kind of aspiring artists and playwrights. And that was with a girl named Angela Sclafani. But then the one that was really exciting, which is probably the one you're referring to as well, is I got to do 24-hour musicals Broadway, and some of the other music directors. Rona Siddiqui was one of the other MDs, who's another very active member in our community, who's wonderful and I love deeply. And basically what happens is they assemble an all-star team of composers and playwrights and people, and they break them into 4 teams, and they have from 10 p.m. They meet the previous night at 10 p.m., 9 or 10 p.m. They have to start writing. They're all given, like, they all bring in personal artifacts, and using those kind of form the basis of the show. And they get to choose their artifacts, and basically they have from 10 p.m. the night before the show till 5 a.m. to write a 15-minute musical. And there are certain criteria, like it has to have at least 3 songs and stuff. And basically, so starting at, 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. as songs start being finished, they have a team of transcribers who are like ready to get on it, because rehearsals start at 9 a.m. So we had a meet and greet, or maybe it was 10 a.m. But basically we had a meet and greet, I think at 8:30 in the morning. And then like at 9 we started rehearsing, and I got assigned my cast as I was in the cab over. And my cast, somehow I had John Mulaney, I had Jose Lana, who is just phenomenal. I had Jordan Roth, who of like Juju Manson theaters, like the cast was insane. And the writers were Jonathan Mark Sherman, Amy Mann, and Jonathan Coulton. And like it was just, this room was the craziest room I've ever been in my entire life. And we had 4.5 hours to rehearse a 15-minute show. And the game is everyone has to be off book. Obviously not the MD, but everyone in the cast has to be off book. And I learned really quickly that like John Mulaney has almost instant photographic recall. Like he had the whole show memorized in like an hour. It was crazy. Um, and then you tech the show in the afternoon, and obviously there are four groups who have to tech. Basically there was a six-piece band. Tomoko and Zach, who are a couple, Zach Zinger, who is phenomenal. Zach was the band leader slash music supervisor, and basically I had 15 minutes to tech. I had 15 minutes before we teched for like 45 minutes to just shout orchestrations at people. It was literally insane. I was like, maybe you do it. Like I kind of planned it out. I sketched it, and I was like, we need drums to come in here, and then Tomoko was like, I can do like a violin thing here for texture. And I was like, yes, do that. And then it was like just shouting for 15 minutes. We had 45 minutes to tech the show, and then the show happens. So like literally, it is the most consolidated, packed neutron star of a 24 hours you could possibly imagine. And everyone's stressed, but the stress plays into it, and it's for a really good cause. No one gets paid. It's all for charity. And they raised a ton of money this year for the Lilies and a bunch of other things. But like Jessica Hecht was also in our cast, and she forgot like half of her lines. And so it kind of becomes this game of like like the audience loves it and everyone's screaming because she's like trying to get through. At one point she was like, I think she said something like, this is why people my age shouldn't be doing this. And the whole audience lost it. It's a joyful, stressful, really exciting, one of a kind experience. And to anyone in the group, whoever has the chance at any level, if you see that they're looking for people, I highly, highly suggest getting involved in 24-hour plays, 24-hour musicals. They're phenomenal.
You do all these really cool projects, but then you also did go on tour with Cruel Intentions and with Charlie Brown Christmas. So now, how are those quote unquote more regular, more usual gigs for you?
It depends. Actually, Charlie Brown Christmas I supervised, so I actually didn't have to go out on that one. I went out to tech to a couple different places. But Cruel Intentions, yeah, I did actually go out on tour. The irony is because I'm doing, I've really made the choice to do a lot of developmental stuff and work with a lot of new composers. There hasn't been, Cruel Intentions was really my first experience on the road doing 8 a week, doing the consistent thing. And it was interesting. It presented its own host of problems, but also its own joys. Also being like the big thing that I was thinking for anyone in the group, obviously, like a lot of people are all scattered all around the world doing community stuff or doing semi-pro regional stuff. The thing about doing a show regionally or something that's set versus something that's on the road, your responsibility as MD to me felt totally different than anything I had ever done before, where it really like communication and like a lot of the actual playing of the show becomes like, a small percent of the job. And then a lot of the job is logistics. A lot of job is being able to put in understudy, like standard things, but also like communication because people are moving, because the venues are new. We encountered a venue where they had given us the wrong schematics for the space. So the band had to, instead of being on stage, had to be located in the dressing room, and we did it remotely. It's just about being open and about being engaged and about being ready for literally anything, because everything goes wrong on tour in the best way possible. You know what I mean? So yeah, doing it. Cruel Intentions was great. Zach Spound, who did the vocal arrangements and half of the orchestrations, other than a bunch of the keyboard programming, which I did, wrote just the coolest arrangements, very like Moulin Rouge-esque, where we had like 35 or 40 songs packed into an hour and 40 minutes, just like really, really phenomenal arrangements of pop tunes, rock tunes, and 90s tunes. We got to actually like do some cool expanded arrangements of like NSYNC and Britney and all of the stuff, which was a joy, and the cast was phenomenal. And audiences loved it. I mean, it's Cruel Intentions. It's a lot of people's, that movie holds a very specific meaning for a lot of people around the country, as I discovered. A lot of people kind of had their like sexual awakening to that movie. And
Really?
It was like Gossip. That movie is like Gossip Girl, pre-Gossip Girl. It's about men. It's about backstabbing Manhattan billionaire children. it's based on actually the French play Liaison Dangereuse, which
Ah,
so it's like overlaid on like 19, I guess like late 90s billionaire Upper East Side
oh
children
yeah.
who are trying to backstab each other. So it's fun. But yeah, that was a great experience. And just being able to finally like do the 8 a week and know what that feels like, because that is a totally different experience than running around copying, orchestrating, doing stuff behind the scenes, and then doing workshops and readings, which is like a whole different game.
So what does that feel like, the 8 a week for you?
Um, I loved it. I think what 8 a week does, and I'm sure everyone who's done it would agree to some degree. What a statement to say. I mean, I think it fully depends on the like literally magnifying it to that degree makes the whatever show it is, you feel the show like really intensely. Like if it's a big play versus if it's kind of like an easy book versus if it's long versus if there are long dialogue breaks versus if you're on all the time. I mean, Cruel was, I felt lucky that with Cruel, I had two of the best musicians I've ever played with, who are two of my closest collaborators, on the road with me. And then we had an Ableton set up that I was triggering that I had actually programmed. And it was constant music. And it was just like one thing to another, always on, in and out in like an hour. You know, there was intermission. I guess with intermission it was like an hour 50. So it was good. And there were no like long breaks. There was no worry of downtime and of having to stay engaged, especially for the rest of the bands when people are on the road. It never felt like a job. It was, and we only did like 75 shows, so it was great.
And then on another side, you've worked with Titus Burgess.
I have.
How was that?
Unbelievable. True artist, just someone who has such intense vision, and such intense feelings about style and interpretation and arrangement. A lot of times, I mean, you never know what you're going to get when you're working with different people, and it's all about listening. And for some people say, okay, well, like, it's, help guide me, help, that as music director, you're making decisions and your thing. And whereas here, it's just someone who is so many levels above, and I just was listening, and I was just like, okay, you have very specific conceptions of things and can do anything vocally and musically, and not a lot of people know this, but he also is extremely, extremely proficient as a pianist. He can play JRB stuff, and he's just, he's a fantastic artist, and I felt very, very thankful to be able to work with him. So I played rehearsals for the Carnegie Hall show, and then went out and played the show that he just did with the Portland, through the umbrella of the Portland Symphony in Portland, Oregon. So that was really exciting.
And you just did a workshop for Norwegian Cruise Line, is that right?
Yeah, we did the workshop last summer, and then we were supposed to be out on the ship this past rehearsal December, and then ship February. That got pushed back because of logistical things, because I guess securing rights to music is, stuff happens. And then the unfortunate truth was we were supposed to now be in rehearsal in May and ship in June, which cruise ship's not doing too well right now. So
who knows? Well, we actually had a question on that by Chris, who was like, how does one get involved with cruise ships? How did you end up there?
Total luck. Dream gig. And this is like, I can't impart this enough, that the time that you put in doing little menial, or what feel like menial jobs, and meeting people. I just happened to do a nymph show a couple of years ago, and it turns out that the choreographer for the nymph show works with Norwegian often, and she and her co-choreographer, co-director, knew that I had fully transcribed the entire score and arranged and orchestrated everything and made charts for a 5 or 6 person band. So she was like, hey, maybe we could fold someone new into the Norwegian fray. And that's kind of how, honestly, that one was total luck. But I feel like it's like anything. It's who you know, and it's the connections. That I feel very lucky that I just made a random connection on a nymph show of all things, which, at the end of the nymph show, we looked at each other and we were like, well, that's it for this show forever, because this show's doesn't have, we could all feel like it was fun, we had a good time, it didn't have a future. But then this random connection that I made from that one show 3 years ago called me. I was like, hey, we have an exciting thing potentially. And of course I was super stoked to do that. And cruise ships are a whole different ballgame in terms of their structure and in terms of, all of the problems and the things that we face in New York and other places for developing shows. Everything is exactly switched, because in New York, everyone has a killer team and usually like a really great product and a beautiful piece and a this and a that, and then no one has any money. And everyone needs producers and needs people to be behind the project. Whereas Norwegian, the only given they have is they have infinite, or not infinite money, but they have money because they are a multi-billion-dollar corporation. So just kind of the priorities change, and it's cool. And they do everything in-house. They have their own casting, they have their own rehearsal studios. They have everything is kind of in this umbrella of a single world, which was interesting to navigate and to get into. And it was a great, so far, the project isn't canceled. It's obviously postponed until they're able to do it. But I feel very grateful. And unfortunately, the short answer to the question is it was total luck. and just like the more people you meet, the more people you know, and the more people who you vibe with, the better, I guess.
And now you're using your days right now that we're all in confinement. You're using it to make this awesome, cool thing, a virtual choir.
Yeah, that's one of the few things that I've been involved with, which actually, ironically, that house party, that immersive house party thing you mentioned before, that is related to this project. That the final song in that show is kind of all 14 of these characters have come together. And it's a big celebration with the audience of music and of life. And it's called Holding On. It's kind of this anthem of togetherness. And it's actually been a thing that is one of the few things that feels really good right now. And like it's going to make a positive change. And basically in terms of what anyone watching or anyone in the group can do, is we're looking for all sorts of instruments. Piano is probably the one we're looking for the least, but a lot of people here sing, I know a lot of people here play a lot of different instruments. And, if you're one of those multi-instrumentalists who happens to be able to play a euphonium or a tuba or an oboe or anything, you're free to submit on. We have, there's a link that we'll figure out how to disseminate. And basically there's sheet music for a whole bunch of different instruments. There's sheet music for 7 or 8 different choir or vocal parts. And we're just trying to put together almost like an Eric Whitacre-esque giant online choir and orchestra to be like, hey, people from all around the world are coming together to try to make it through this together.
Well, thanks for inviting us to play along, and then congratulations on all these cool innovative stuff you're doing. And
thank
everyone,
you so much.
Thank you for tuning in. We very recently started a Instagram account, so join us at Theater Music Directors. It's going to be your Instagram account. We're going to be tagging you guys and stuff, so join us in there so we can get it going and have it be a really fun place. At theatermusicdirectors.com, not .com. Oh my gosh. You got it. Instagram, Theater Music Directors. Woohoo! Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Geraldine.
Bye.
See everybody. Bye.